Here's a solution for the next time you ask your child to do something and it doesn't happen. We're borrowing parenting tools from the professionals to help kids follow directions. Child psychologist Dr. Adam Schewbach joins me. He's here to talk about this daunting task we feel like as parents when we ask our kids to do something and they don't. Now, in your experience, is this something a lot of parents have an issue with?
I think it's probably the number one question that we get asked every day in my practice is, how do I get my child to do something when I need him to do it? How do I get him to follow directions? I think it's a parenting problem that all of us face.
So then the follow-up question is, so how do we give instructions that help?
Sure, I think there's a few, maybe 3 or 4 quick tips that we kind of like to handle with or work with. And number one is timing. I think timing is very critical when it comes to directions. And we're busy parents, all of us are busy, we have a lot of things going on. And sometimes we want that direction to be done right now, or sometimes we ask our child to do something when they're in the middle of something else. So when we ask the question, I think is pretty critical.
So for an example, if you ask your kids to pick up their toys, where does the timing in that come into play?
Sure, I think if you're wanting them to pick up those toys 30 seconds after you have to be out the door, that's going to be a struggle. You might need to cue or prompt them prior to giving that direction. So you might cue them and say, hey, you've got 5 minutes, or let's make sure that we're getting ready to watch the clock. And so you're cueing and giving a prompt that something's going to change and something's going to happen. And giving that cue and prompt ahead of time is going to help you with that timing. There may not always be the right perfect time, but we have to try to do our best to kind of respect their time and what activity they're doing in that moment.
And now you talk about a lot of the time as parents we don't fully acknowledge the child in giving them directions, and you talk about making eye contact.
Sure. Making eye contact is very critical, and what that tells us is if you get eye contact with your child, number one is they're likely going to be listening to you. And this can be for your spouse. If your husband's not paying attention and you want him to follow direction, make sure they've got eye contact, make sure they're looking you in the eye, and that's going to ensure that they're listening to what you're trying to tell them.
And can you give me an example of how, making that direct eye contact, how the child or the spouse is going to respond a bit better?
Typically what you want to do, and we may mention this, is about proximity and where we stand when we give a direction. So right now, you and I, we're about 3 or 4 feet away, and that's a really good distance of where you want to be standing, because automatically, if you get within 2 to 3 feet of your child, they are going to look at you no matter what they're doing. If you get up close to them, you stand next to them, even if they're playing video games, they are likely going to turn and look at you in the eye, and they're going to make some kind of eye contact with you, which is really important when you're giving directions.
So it's not the best idea to just yell from the kitchen, hey, pick up your toys.
Yeah. And I'm just as guilty of that as a parent. I'll be downstairs yelling to my kids upstairs. But as close as proximity as we can get is the best thing to ensure that we can help them follow through with their direction.
Now, one of your big things is you encourage parents to use cues and prompts with their children. Explain what that is.
Well, prompting is a little bit different than demanding. So a prompt may be something like, hey, Susie, we're getting ready to leave here in 5 minutes. We need to make sure that all the toys are put away. Now you're prompting them. You're giving them some kind of cue that something's coming down the pipeline. Or a prompt of tomorrow morning, it's Saturday, we got to make sure that we're pulling the weeds. And now we're cueing and prompting instead of just demanding that they follow that direction right when we give it to them. So I think all of us benefit from prompts. It helps us to kind of think and remind us of what are the things we need to be doing.
And do you think that it's sometimes parents that they forget that their kids need reminders?
Yes, I think we do. We're busy, and we're all busy, and we're busy as parents. We're busy doing things. I imagine moms at home just they're multitasking and have a lot on their plate, and sometimes we aren't really paying attention to maybe just the small little things that can make a big difference.
And how does the tone of your voice impact the way the child reacts?
The tone of our voice is extremely important, and if any parent can figure out how to keep their voice calm and quiet, they can call me and help me understand how to do this. But we do know that if we can have a quiet, kind of a calm tone when we give a direction, it still needs to be firm, it still needs to be stern, but it needs to be calm and somewhat quiet. So it's, hey, Susie, you need to pick up your toys right now. But that is a calm tone. If we're screaming, yelling, kind of having our own little meltdown, it's going to be a little bit harder for our kids to follow through with directions.
And now, along with that tone, what about the placement of where you are? Does that matter?
Yes, and we mentioned that the proximity and where we stand is very, very important. And they've actually done a lot of research on this. And you mentioned, you don't want to yell a direction from the kitchen to your kids who are downstairs in the basement. You want to get about 2 or 3 feet away from them, get in that close proximity, and when you do that, things will automatically happen. Your child will make eye contact, they're going to be more likely to listen to what you say, and more importantly, that body language when you're close to your child, it's showing them that you're in control, that you mean business, and that you're asking them to do something. So that proximity, again, whether it's your child or your husband, is going to be very important in helping them follow directions.
Some great tricks and ways to, as parents, simple tweaks that we can make in what we're doing to get better results from our kids.
Right.
Adam, thank you so much for being with us. We truly appreciate this great advice.
You're welcome. Thank you.